running. Welcome once again to Grockit GMAT edition, where we go through the 12th edition of the official guide to the test, question by question, cover to cover, with answers and explanations, and you get to actually see the notes that we take, or the notes that I take anyway, on the questions as we go. And we left off last time on page 42, I believe. Let me just double check. Yes. Number 42, page 42, question 41. So page 42, question 41. Okay. So excavators at the Indus Valley site of Harappa in eastern Pakistan say the discovery of inscribed shards dating to circa 2800 to 2600 BC indicate their development of a Harappan writing system, the use of inscribed seals impressed into clay for marking ownership, and the standardization of weights for trade or taxation occurred many decades, if not centuries, earlier than was previously believed. The first thing we should say to ourselves when we read this one is that clearly there's some kind of list here. We have in the ending the underlined portion, we have the standardization of weights. Within the underlined portion, we have the use of inscribed seals, which suggests that lists that we're dealing with a list here, and lists on the GMAT need to be parallel in construction to whatever degree is possible. So since the last item in the list ends with the use, the standardization of weights, and that part's in the non-negotiable, non-underlined portion of the passage, we absolutely need to have the other elements of the passage follow suit. So, the list needs to be the X, the Y, and the Z. Because the Z is the part that is in the non-underlined portion. The other two need to be parallel. So we can actually quickly do a scan of which answer choices have the use, the standardization. We need the development, the use, and the standardization. So choice A has their development rather than the development. Can't use choice A. Choice B has the development, but then it has using at the end. So we need the use, not using. Can't be choice B. Choice C, we have their development and using, so that's doubly wrong. We need the in front of each thing. Choice D has the development and their use. Again, not sufficient for our purposes. And choice E has the development of a Harappan writing system and the use. So this is obviously the most tempting of our answer choices, but it's not the only error that's in the passage itself, or in the underlined portion. The other issue is with the main verb indicate. So the normal idiom is that you indicate that something. So the correct answer choices also need to say indicate that. Choice A has indicate there. Choice B has indicate that, as does C, and as does E. Choice D also just has indicates the development. So we also need our word that here. Choice D was wrong because it's missing that, and as is choice A. This one had there and that as issues. So basically, for multiple reasons. And then the final split in the answer choices. Again, we've clearly identified the right answer, but since we're talking about what's wrong with things, the subject of the sentence, the subject of the verb indicate is the discovery. So not shards. So the discovery is singular, shards is plural. Note that shards is closer to the main verb indicate than the subject discovery is. And so Some of the answer choices have the plural form indicate, on the assumption that you're not reading carefully and you only read back as far as the word shards. So choices A and B also have indicate, which is incorrect. C, D, and E have indicates, which is the singular form, correctly matching with the noun discovery, the subject of the verb. So for these many reasons, choice E is the correct answer. Still on page 42. Question number 42. So the Supreme Court has ruled that public universities may collect student activity fees, even with students' objections to particular activities, so long as the groups they give money to will be chosen without regard to their views. So of course, again, the first thing we always need to do is to determine whether there's anything wrong with the sentence as written. There's a couple things that I just notice off right away on this one. First off, the verb at the end of the underlined portion will be. We already have we have a present perfect tense has ruled in the main portion. So it's a little bit unusual to have the future tense will be chosen. Secondly, the they towards the end of the underlined portion is a little bit vague. We have public universities, we have students, we have activities, multiple things that they could be referring to, and when you have multiple things that they could reasonably be referring to, it's in your best interest to clarify it to whatever extent you are able. Especially on the GMAT where ambiguity is death. So in choice A then we have the strange future tense will be. We also have the ambiguous they. So choice A's got some problems. Choice B it does look like it simplifies things a little bit. But it actually makes things worse. We have if they have objections. So is they the universities? Is they the students? Of course, context tells us that they is the students, but grammatically it's not clear, and so we don't want to have that ambiguous they in there if we can avoid it. And so also the if in choice B makes it a problem. If should only be used in conditions. So having if in there, and choice C has if also, that actually makes it into a conditional statement. The Supreme Court has ruled that public universities may collect student activity fees even if they have objections. So technically you can still say that, but if is definitely not as desirable in this case. We definitely would rather have some other type of contrasting expression, like but or although or something along those lines. So if they have objections to particular activities and the groups that are given money are chosen. So we have the verb, the verb is corrected, but the ambiguous they is enough to doom choice B as the correct answer. Choice C repeats the they, which remains ambiguous. We have multiple plural entities. The second problem with choice C is the but after the comma. So in this one, the Supreme Court has ruled that public universities may collect student activity fees even if they object to particular activities, but the groups with the money that the money is given to have to be chosen. Really, there's not meant to be a contrast. This is all part of the same ruling. So no, that's not quite true. It is all part of the same ruling. It is a little bit of an opposition. There's also a wordiness in this one that the money is to be given, that the money is given to have to be. That's grammatically correct, but far wordier than the GMAT would normally prefer. So choice C then also has wordiness. And the but is a little bit odd there, because it is all part of the same ruling. So choice C, from students who object to particular activities so long as the groups given money are. So we've collapsed the groups that the money is given to have to be into the groups given money are, a much more concise statement. We don't have the strange but from the thing that's all one ruling. We also have the they that was ambiguous in other answer choices. We have that one gone. Choice D looks pretty good. Let's check choice E. So those students have an objection to particular activities, but the groups that are given money be. So there's a couple of problems here. One, those students have an objection. That's a wordier form than just saying students object. So we don't want to have the have an objection. It's got that strange but again. No joke intended. And the final word be is misplaced. It's there to attract people who are expecting something to be in the subjunctive there, and so you can have the verb be in a sentence like that. You could say, I ask that you be careful. So some verbs can generate a verb in the form of be. That's the subjunctive in English. But the previous verb is not in the subjunctive, so it doesn't match the rest of it. So we don't switch moods midstream. So choice E with its be is also wrong. So choice C was out. Choice D is our remaining answer choice. It's very concise, doesn't have any ambiguous pronouns, and correctly keeps the rhetorical flow of explaining the ruling made by the Supreme Court. So page 42, question number 43. So despite the increasing number of women graduating from law school and passing bar examinations, the proportion of judges and partners at major law firms who are women have not risen to a comparable extent. So on this one, again, we always look for an error in the form initially as written to basically allow us to eliminate choice A if possible. In this particular case, we have a subject and a verb mismatch in this one. The sentence subject, or the clause subject of the independent clause, is the proportion, namely the proportion of judges and partners. Proportion is a singular noun, even though it includes multiple units within it, but proportion is singular, so we need a singular verb with it. The verb is have not risen. That's the plural form. So choice A has proportion have when it should be proportion has. So choice A is totally not the right answer. We can also go ahead and look for that same mistake in multiple other answer choices. Choice B has the proportion have. I'll abbreviate it so I don't have to write out proportion every time. So it can't be choice B. Choice C does not have that. Choice D has proportion has not risen, and choice E has proportion has not risen. So just by virtue of the subject verb mismatch in number, we're able to eliminate two of the answer choices. Let's look for other things. The other issue that we have to look for here is the modification of where women are in there. So looking at choice B, we already eliminated choice B, but we have the issue of proportion of women judges and partners versus proportion of judges and partners who are women. So choices B and D have women judges and partners, and choice E and C have proportion of judges and partners at major law firms who are women. Which one is right? So this is an interesting issue, grammatically speaking. You can have an adjective and then one noun and then another noun. So the question is whether the adjective that's modifying this noun can also modify this other noun. So we have women judges and partners. We could just as easily have red shirt and shoes. So if someone was wearing a red shirt and shoes, would you take that to mean that the shirt and the shoes are red, or that they are wearing a red shirt and then also just wearing shoes of some color that has not been determined? In everyday speech, of course, people will very regularly use an adjective in front of two nouns and expect that by context it's clear that you should understand that it's applying to both. Grammatically speaking, it's not nearly as clear-cut as that. And again, the GMAT is nothing if not insistent on grammatical clarity. So in this particular case, the GMAT prefers that you either repeat the adjective or construct the sentence some other way. So even though it's somewhat clear that the adjective could be modifying this noun and this noun, it's not necessarily true. The other issue, of course, is that women itself is not an adjective, it's a noun. And normally you shouldn't be modifying nouns with other nouns. There are cases in English, lots of cases in English where it gets done, even in formal English at this point. But the default is there's actually an adjective for women, and that's the word female. So female, although female can also be used as a noun, but female is ultimately an adjective originally. And so really it should be modifying those two. The GMAT would prefer that we say red shirt and red shoes. So in this particular case, we can eliminate choice B as well as choice D. For the placement of women before judges, without it clearly also referring to partners. If that particular means of eliminating choice D doesn't inspire confidence, we also have the issue of choices D and E starting with the word yet. So you can start clauses with the word yet. I went to the store, yet I didn't buy anything because nothing looked good to me. Or she's a friend of mine, yet I really don't approve of what she just did. So yet is a conjunction, but it's a subordinating. Well, it can be a coordinating conjunction, with the fanboys. For and nor, but, or, yet, and so. But beginning the clause with it is unnecessary. We already have contrast from the word despite in the first clause, so we don't actually need a yet after it to provide contrast. We already have the contrast built in to the first clause. So it's an extra word, and the GMAT hates extra words, so we can get rid of choice D and E on the basis of yet. Which leaves us only with choice C. So choice C, reading it back in, despite the increasing number of women graduating from law school and passing bar examinations, the proportion of judges and partners at major law firms who are women has not risen comparably. It is, of course, also a little bit unusual on the GMAT to have the phrase "who are women" postponed as far as it is. Keep in mind, though, that the word "who" can really only apply to people. So even though we're talking about even though the noun immediately before "who" is major law firms, law firms is the object of the preposition "at," so it's in its own little phrase. Also, "who" could not grammatically refer to law firms. It can only refer to people. So we would say which law firms, which are women, if we wanted to say that. So in this particular case, there are multiple reasons why it's okay to postpone "who are women," even though, well past the actual nouns that we're referring to, namely the judges and the partners. Oh, forgot to circle it. Choice C, correct answer. Okay, moving on. Okay, question number 44. Seldom more than 40 feet wide and 12 feet deep, but it ran for 363 miles across the rugged wilderness of upstate New York, the Erie Canal connected the Hudson River at Albany to the Great Lakes at Buffalo, providing the port of New York City with a direct water link to the heartland of the North American continent. Again, our first step always is to look for errors in the original sentence. Everything that we have basically leading up to the second comma, the comma after New York, is all a phrase that's meant to modify the Erie Canal. Because, or well, at least in this sentence as written. So a modifying phrase, in this case on the GMAT, is usually a bunch of adjective or in some cases participle modification of some noun, or even adverbial stuff. So according to experts, comma, a recent study has shown. Okay, so everything leading up to there should be adjective, descriptive stuff. In this particular instance, we have a verb stuck in the middle there. So we have seldom more than 40 feet wide and 12 feet deep. We could actually just move right on there and say the Erie Canal, blah, blah, blah. But then we have additional information about how it ran 363 miles across. Okay, so it's additional information describing the Erie Canal. But in this case, including the verb "but it ran," or the making it into a clause, makes it no longer possible to modify a noun at the end of the sentence. So, "but it ran" messes up the construction of choice A. It should instead, if we wanted to continue to modify the Erie Canal, it could say seldom more than 40 feet wide and 12 feet deep, but running 363 miles, or something along those lines. So since we know that this is an opening modifying phrase, at least in the original sentence, we should check to make sure, because this is something that happens on the GMAT all the time, where you have an opening modifying phrase that then the noun after it is not something that could be modified by that phrase. So in choice B, we still have a bunch of descriptive stuff, and then it ends with the Erie Canal, so that's fine. Choice C turns the whole thing into a whole separate clause. It was seldom blah blah blah, but the Erie Canal connecting. Okay. Now, unfortunately, what this does in choice C, not that there's a problem automatically with changing it from a modifying phrase, which just modifies Erie Canal, to its own separate clause, which has a subject and a verb. But then what it does is, with "but" at the end, but the Erie Canal connecting da da da, the word "but" is what's called a coordinating conjunction. And the word "but" among the, this isn't unique to "but," it needs to join things that are equal. So you can say sad but true. Sad and true are both adjectives. So the two things joined by but need to be the same thing grammatically. But can join two complete clauses. Um, he ran all the way to the store, but he was exhausted by the time he got there. So each of those things is a whole clause on either side of the word but. In choice C, we have a clause. It was seldom. Okay, so that's a sentence. And then we have the word but at the end, which should then join another whole clause. But instead, sorry for using but in a sentence about but, what it does instead, though, after the word but, what's there is not an independent, or it's not a whole clause to match the thing that comes before the word but. But the Erie Canal, connecting the Hudson River at Albany to the Great Lakes at Buffalo, providing the port of New York City with a direct water link to the heartland of the North American continent, that on its own is just a modifying phrase. So, but cannot join a modifying phrase to a whole clause. The two things that it joins need to be parallel. So, the problem with choice C that we just ran into is the placement of but plus a modifying phrase. Okay, so choice D, again, we were just kind of looking here to make sure that if the opening modifying phrase stays as an opening modifying phrase, that it ends right before the thing that it's modifying. Choice D is another one that starts with an actual clause, a thing with a subject and a verb. So the Erie Canal was seldom more than 40 feet wide, blah, 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 across the rugged wilderness of upstate New York, which connected. So which, in this particular case, normally is going to refer grammatically to the thing that just came before it. In this case, that's upstate New York. There are instances where the word which, when you have comma which, can refer to the whole clause that came beforehand, but that's rare on the GMAT. It's rare in general, and it certainly isn't going to refer all the way back to Erie Canal, which is the thing that actually does the connecting. So choice D, the which connected, is a problem. Choice E is another one. So it looks like actually only choices A and B started with the opening modifying phrase. Choices C, D, and E have started with clauses, things that have subjects and verbs. So the Erie Canal, comma, seldom more than 40 feet wide and 12 feet deep, but running 363 miles across the rugged wilderness of upstate New York, connecting. So here we notice that there's actually no main verb at all. In the previous one, choice D, we had the Erie Canal was seldom more than 40 feet. In this one, we have the Erie Canal, and then the comma basically puts the sentence on pause. We're still waiting for a main verb. And what it does is it gives us a series of modifiers without ever actually unpausing the sentence and giving us a main verb to finish the thought. So choice E has no main verb. Now we didn't actually read through all of choice B, so we need to determine whether there's anything wrong with that one. I kind of hope there isn't, because we found things wrong with the other ones, but we need to be careful. So choice B, we're starting with a modifying phrase, seldom more than 40 feet wide or 12 feet deep, but running 363 miles across the rugged wilderness of upstate New York, the Erie Canal connected. Okay, so there we do get a main verb, and then connected, and then it's all that stuff about the connection afterwards, which I'm not going to read again. Let's compare that beginning part then, the seldom more than 40 feet wide or 12 feet deep, just to make sure that that's done correctly. So choice A had the same thing, but we had another problem with choice A. Choice C, 40 feet wide and 12 feet deep, and ran. So here, choice B has but before explaining how far it ran. Choice C has and. In this particular case, the sense of the sentence is that the Erie Canal is not very big, 40 feet wide, 12 feet deep, but that it's very long. So there's a contrast between the breadth of the canal and the depth of the canal versus its length. So whenever there is some kind of logical contrast, the GMAT absolutely prefers that you use contrast words built into the built into your sentence. So we do want something like but in choice B rather than and. Choice D repeats that same error with and, but it also introduces a new one. The Erie Canal was seldom more than 40 feet wide or 12 feet deep. That actually changes the meaning of the sentence. It means that that at one point it may, seldom be more than 12 feet deep, but maybe 100 feet wide. So we need the two things together, the two small measures to be joined by an and then an or separating the one. That's the incredible length. Well, not incredible, but more impressive than the actual other dimensions of the canal. Okay, so this one, obviously, when they underline larger portions and do more different things with them, it takes a little bit longer. Obviously, it also takes longer when you have someone who has to explain it to you. But choice B correctly keeps the modifying phrase. When in doubt, your default should be to leave the sentence as close as possible to the original, unless it's complete nonsense. And it also includes the correct rhetorical devices to show the contrast between the dimensions and then the length. And it meshes well with the rest of the sentence. And I already read it in once, so I'm not going to do it again. Okay, choice B it is. Okay, on to page 43. Number 45. So in 1923, the Supreme Court declared a minimum wage for women and children in the District of Columbia as unconstitutional, and ruling that it was a form of price fixing and, as such, an abridgment of the right of contract. So always we want to look for that error initially. In this particular case, there's a little bit of an unusual, there's a mistake in the idiom. The normal idiom of the word declare, there's a couple different ones. You either declare X, sorry, that's not true. You declare that X is Y. You can declare Y X. I declare it good. You can do that, and you can also say X is declared Y. Maybe I should underline these so it's, and rewrite this in here so it's clear. You can declare Y X. X is declared Y. So, actually, this should be declared XY. Anyway, declare it good. Well, you could actually say declared what you can say XY or YX. He declared good the pizza that he had for dinner. Now that would be a very strange inverted sentence structure, but it's at least allowable in English. In no case, though, do we have declaring X as Y. And that's what the original answer choice does, choice A. So declare as is wrong. Let's look for other answer choices that have declare as. So choice B has the Supreme Court declared as unconstitutional. So another declare as. Choice C, the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional. Okay, well that one's fine, at least in that regard. Choice D, the thing was declared unconstitutional. Okay, that's fine. Choice E, declared a minimum wage as unconstitutional. So this was another declare as. So we got rid of 3 answer choices on the basis of idiom. Idiom is one of the more uncomfortable parts of the GMAT because there's so many more to learn, but common ones involve the prepositions and especially the prepositions and conjunctions that commonly pattern with certain verbs. Those are the main idiom issues on the GMAT. So we have to compare choices C and D. So we have choice C: the Supreme Court declared unconstitutional a minimum wage for women and children in the District of Columbia. And choice D: in 1923, a minimum wage for women and children in the District of Columbia was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Now, in this particular case, we do actually have to read further to make sure that this is correct. Then the next word in the non-underlined portion is ruling that it was a form of price fixing. So by changing the subject in choice D to a minimum wage from the Supreme Court in the original sentence, it makes the minimum wage the thing that is ruling that it was a form of price fixing. Now, of course, again, contextually, you would know that it was the Supreme Court that did the ruling. Grammatically, though, the GMAT does insist that when you have modifiers that they correctly match up with the thing that they're modifying. Choice D cannot be right because of that subject shift. On top of that, it's got the passive voice, so minimum wage was declared was declared by the Supreme Court. So minimum wage was declared by the Supreme Court, 8 words, versus the Supreme Court declared the minimum wage, 7 words. So every word is important on the GMAT. Extra words are naughty. So choice D is passive, and it also has a modifier issue. Namely that it changes the sentence to changes what the word ruling in the non-underlined portion is modifying. That leaves us only with choice C as the correct answer. Still on page 43, number 46. Researchers have found that individuals who have been blind from birth, and who thus have never seen anyone gesture, nevertheless make hand motions when speaking just as frequently and in virtually the same way as sighted people do, and that they will gesture even when conversing with another blind person. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is decide whether there's anything wrong with it. Well, so the sentence as written does have the word who modifying people, individuals who have been blind and who have never seen. So that modification stays correct. Then we have a modifying. Then we have another. Then we have the actual main verb. So the whole who stuff. Who have been blind, who have never seen. Those are just extra modifiers. The main sentence is researchers have found that individuals make hand motions. And right. So and then really it's also researchers have found X and found Y. They have found that individuals blah blah blah, and that they will gesture even when conversing. So the things that we would normally look for do appear to be correct. It's possible that there's a more concise way of saying this, and on harder GMAT questions they may well do that to you, give you something that's correct as written, but grammatically correct as written, but that there's some clearer way of saying it elsewhere. So let's check the other answer choices. So choice B, researchers have found individuals who thus never saw anyone gesturing, nevertheless make hand motions when speaking just as frequent and in virtually in the same way as sighted people did, and that they will gesture. Multiple problems with choice B. First off, the verb saw. Saw versus have seen. So saw is the past tense, the simple past. Have seen is the present perfect. The present perfect tense is kind of interesting because it's, even though it has the word perfect, meaning that the action is completed, it's in the present tense, which means the action is completed anytime recently up to and including the actual present moment. I have lived in my condo for 3 years and I'm still in it. So I can use the present perfect because it brings us all the way up to a very recent time, including the present. And what they're talking about, of course, we're talking about people who have been blind from birth, and they continue to be blind. So that brings us all the way up to the present. The simple past, quite frankly, is less specific and less clear in this regard. In terms of when you would use the present perfect on the GMAT, I had a student ask me that: when would I know that I should use the present perfect? One clear instance is actually in the non-underlined portion of this test. You will very, very often see it when you have researchers doing a study. Researchers have found the study has been recently completed and we are reporting the results of that study. We use the present perfect tense. Also, when you want to talk about states that are historical but go all the way up to the present tense. So choice B has saw versus have seen. It also has the adjective versus adverb issue. So frequent versus frequently. Remember that adjectives, this is our adjective, this is our adverb. Adjectives can really only modify nouns. That's an N. Take my word for it. Adverbs can modify verbs, adverbs, and adjectives. The difference here, of course, so when speaking just as frequent, they make hand motions when speaking just as frequent. Frequent there really does need to be modifying how often they do it, and it's when speaking. Or they make hand motions, actually it's modifying make. They make hand motions frequently. So that's modifying the verb. We really do need to use frequently. This is the issue actually when people say, I did good versus I did well. Good is the adjective, well is the adverb. And if you're using, when you say I did good, I suppose you can say that if you're a superhero or something. And of course, people say this in everyday speech all the time, including me, and I love grammar. So, this isn't so much about correcting your everyday speech. This is about getting things right on the GMAT. But this is what people are getting at when they complain about people saying, I did, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Well, if you're good, that, maybe you are giving money to orphans or something like that, versus I am well, it's a little bit different. Or, how did you do? I did good versus I did well. It's not usually going to be good versus well in the GMAT. It's going to be something more like frequent versus frequently. And in some cases, it can dramatically change the meaning. So be careful about this. And if you're not that comfortable with adjectives versus adverbs, definitely review this topic. Anyway, that was a lot on choice B. And then lastly, choice B also has this did at the end. They make hand motions in virtually the same way as sighted people did. Again, the past tense implies that they did and it's done. We want something that says that sighted people still do make hand gestures. I'm actually making hand gestures while I'm speaking to you, even though you can't see me, because that's how people are. They make gestures when they're talking, even when other people can't see them. That's the point of the question. So, did is another problem with B. Choice C doesn't have quite the same issue, but it does have made, which is also a problem. Again, simple past implies that the action is done with. The results of studies are going to be presented in the present tense because they are statements about what is generally true. Studies have shown that blind people make gestures, not made. Studies have shown that if you do not eat, you die. Okay, so again, the results of studies will almost always be expressed in the present tense because they are statements of general truth. So we can cross off B and C. Choice D, thus never having seen anyone gesture. That's a little bit odd because, because it's not parallel. We have found that individuals who X and thus we would expect parallelism. So we would want individuals who X and who Y. So we're missing a who. And this one also has the frequent issue versus frequently, and it also has did. Plenty of reasons to make D not the right answer. Lastly, we have the thus, we have the know who. Let's see. Nevertheless, to make hand motions, we want to say that they nevertheless make hand motions, not that they nevertheless to make. And let's see. And then the to gesture at the end. While parallel does not actually fit grammatically because they didn't find that individuals to make and individuals to gesture. But since both of these verb phrases, these infinitives, are so far from their subject, they're counting on some people just to notice that the two are parallel and say, aha, GMAT loves parallelism, choice E must be right. But it's not. So that leaves us with choice A, which has been upgraded from I guess it's alright, to awesome, and it's right. Choice A is correct. Alright. On to number 47. Okay. Like embryonic germ cells, which are cells that develop early in the formation of the fetus and that later generate eggs or sperm, embryonic stem cells have the ability of developing themselves into different kinds of body tissue. A, B, C, D, E. The big one that jumps out at me is they have the ability of developing. Ability of is not the correct idiom. You normally have the ability to do something. So, ability of ruins choice A. Let's see if any of the other ones have ability of. Let's see. Choice B has ability to. Choice C has ability to. D has ability to. E has ability of. So we can get rid of choice E as well. The vertical scan really can save you a lot of time on test day. Okay, so what else is wrong with these different things? Another thing that should jump out at us is that this is a comparison sentence, like embryonic germ cells. So we need whatever it is, basically whatever we're comparing to embryonic germ cells needs to be the thing after the comma, after the second comma in this case. The original sentence says embryonic stem cells, so that on the surface would be fine if choice A didn't have other issues. So like embryonic germ cells, embryonic stem cells, blah, blah, blah. We need something that has that and does not alter the comparison. Let's check the answer choices to see which ones ruin the comparison. So choice B has embryonic stem cells, which is fine. Choice C has in embryonic stem cells. That's not good enough. We would need to say as in embryonic stem cells or like in embryonic stem cells. Or sorry, like in embryonic germ cells, in embryonic stem cells. Okay, it needs to be that parallel. If you have preposition with the first part of the comparison, you need to have a preposition with the second part. So in cannot be right in choice C. That's naughty. And choice C also has there is the ability to. There is. I'm not going to say it's never going to be right. On the GMAT, because you could construct sentences where, I mean, it is grammatically correct no matter what. It's just considered wordy, and there are very few instances on the GMAT where that would be the preferred construction. So it's passive. It's considered weak. So in addition to the embryonic, in embryonic there is as an issue with choice C. Choice D, the ability to develop themselves. Okay, so we cannot compare embryonic germ cells to the ability. That is a bad comparison. Actually, both of those are bad comparisons. So I left the word A out of comparison. That's another bad comparison. Anyway, choice D cannot be right. So let's just read choice B in, since we did this one totally by process of elimination. So like embryonic germ cells, which are cells that develop early in the formation of the fetus and that later generate eggs or sperm, embryonic stem cells have the ability to develop into different kinds of body tissue. That sounds exactly like what we're after. Has the correct idiom and the correct comparison, and there isn't any additional wordiness, so choice B gets the nod. Okay. So I think rather than risk not finishing or going over on time, I'm going to stop here on number 47. I didn't get through as many this time. Sorry about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But on this one, we ended up having to cover some actual issues. Actually, that's a good point. If you want me to go through these things faster, you should put some comments on the video page on Grockit saying, "Hey, I want you to spend more time," or I want you to do more questions. We do respond to the feedback, and it does get back to me eventually. So there's still a lot of book left. We're on page 43 out of, well, the book itself is 836 pages. Oh, sorry, 839 pages. Granted, not all of those are questions, but we have a ways to go. So there is plenty of opportunity for me to change this if you who are watching are interested in something else. Anyway, my name is Jim Jacobson. You've been watching the Grockit OGTV GMAT edition, where we go through the questions one by one, and yeah, we give you the answers, the explanations, and you get to see my scribbling as I eliminate answer choices. See you next time. We'll pick up with question number 48